I think so many people think about the terms work and life, and they're trying to do all the things, all the time, but they're not thinking enough about the balance.
Joining me on the show today is Rob Fornango of F1 Analytics. We're having a candid conversation on work life balance, identifying burnout, and what to do if you find yourself there or one of your team. What if the only thing standing in the way of changing your life was having the confidence you need? I've found there's 3 areas you need to be confident in order to succeed: your mind, your faith, and your leadership. One or all 3 of these areas will always be in play. You are listening to Call to Confidence. I'm your host, Sharon Hughes, and confidence looks good on you.
Dale Carnegie of Orange County is proud to sponsor the Call to Confidence podcast. Dale Carnegie is a world-class training organization focused on leadership, communication, presentations, and sales. We help people take command of their lives through taking command of their work.
Well, hey, Rob, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you.
Hi, Sharon. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So, for the audience, just so you have a little backstory, I met Rob on LinkedIn because there was something posted and he replied, and I was replying to this post and happened to read his response. And I go, who is this guy that's talking about this life balance? He sounds really interesting. So I started stalking him on LinkedIn, and here he is. The rest is history, right?
Yeah, very much.
I think one of the things that surprised me was something I was reading that you wrote, where you actually talked about you eat dinner every night at home with your wife. And I was like, okay, this guy definitely has some tips.
Yes.
So tonight we're going to be diving into some work-life balance, and I'm excited to hear how you arrived at the place, because you did hint to me a little bit before that you might have had to have learned a few things the hard way. So I'm
I have.
excited to hear what you're willing to share, my friend.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So I could tell you a little bit about my journey. I mean, I guess you could say I've always been entrepreneurial, and I tend to like go in all in on things when I pursue them. So going back as far as like the first year I was in college, I started out as an engineering major, and I was at a top school, University of Missouri Rolla. But I went there. I was young when I was there, and I was immature. And boy, I learned to party really well. I really lived up that first year and a half at school, so much so that I eventually got kicked out twice. Um,
Wow.
yeah, and the second time they asked me not to come back. So, but when I got my head screwed on straight, I went back to school for business and criminology. I double majored, and too many true crime books at the time that I was reading, so it was an interesting thing. But I threw myself into school, and then I threw myself into work, and I was managing restaurants full time. I was double majoring. I was going to school full time. I was pulling 100+ hour weeks. I had no work life balance whatsoever. And in graduate school, I ended up making myself physically sick, as well as developing a bad case of insomnia, which was lasted for several months, which was just terrible. If you've never had it, like, I don't wish it on anybody. It's awful. But after I finished my PhD, I thought, well, when that's all done, everything will be fine, right? So I ended up at Arizona State University, and I helped build their criminology program. And I was teaching and trying to publish and doing research. And again, I was still working way too much, no work-life balance, and I started having anxiety attacks. And I was like, I have to stop. I can't do this. Like, this is like physically breaking me down. My body cannot handle the stress. So I quit. I just left academia, and I started working. I ended up with a job working in a healthcare quality improvement organization. Started off as an analyst and worked up to being an executive research director. And I love the work. I love the passion of people that were there that I work with. I was working on multiple projects with agencies in the federal government. We did projects across 18 different states in the country. I mean, things that were impacting tens of millions of patients nationwide. And it was great. I really did enjoy it. But over the course of 10 years doing that, the volume of work was increasing, but we were having trouble with the demand, or like trying to find people to join our team that were good and could do the work that we were doing. And it became more of an exercise in doing more with less and increasing the hustle. And all of a sudden, I'm back to working 70 hours a week, nights, weekends,
Wow,
all that kind of stuff. And
that's brutal.
I eventually said, I can't do this anymore. I had no work life balance, and I decided I need to leave, and I'm going to do something on my own terms. And so I kind of landed with where I am now as an entrepreneur, and started my company F1 Analytics, to bring a passion for that analytics and teaching and helping healthcare business leaders learn how to use analytics to improve their performance without them having to like learn the complex math of statistics and programming. They can hire analysts to do that, but they need to be
Mhm.
able to communicate with those analysts and help lead projects. So that's what I
Right.
do now, and I'm doing it on my own terms. It's been really good.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so first question is how old were you when your health went sideways and you just said, "I'm out. I got to take a break."
Um, but so yeah, when I was in graduate school and I had the insomnia issue, I
Mhm.
think I was probably 30, maybe 31, something like
Yeah.
that. And
Were you were you married at that time?
no, no, I
Okay.
wasn't married. I was single. Just me and a couple of cats, and you know, thank God
I
for
love
them.
that.
They kept me kind of sane. But yeah, it was just it was constant work, and eventually it just took over. And I probably ended up, it was one of those things where you end up sleeping like 4 hours a night, 3, 4 hours a night for a couple of months straight, and just
Wow.
it's really
Yeah,
hard to get off of that. Yeah.
really bad for your health.
Mhm.
So, you know what I'm curious about is just like that man's perspective of the drive. Like, I don't know, I always get into like the mindset, suck it up and get it done. Because
Yeah.
I think that that's the messaging to a lot of men, which
Yeah.
is really twisted thinking. I mean, you're human. You got to sleep, you got to eat.
Yeah.
You need to have that downtime. But I'm just curious, like from your perspective, I wonder how different it is for how you perceive being driven and succeeding compared to how I would.
So yeah, that's a really interesting question. And y- I I don't know if I've ever thought about it that much in terms of like how men might get pushed differentially than women in that regard. I definitely have thought about it from like an industry standpoint, like what kinds of industries where they have that sort of like work hard, hustle mentality,
Mhm.
or as I call like the work hard, play hard culture, which I mean, I perceive it now. At the time, like I bought into it, right? Like big time. I was all in. I was like, okay, yeah, let's work 12 hours a day and then go hang out and, kick back and party and do whatever we need to do. And we'll get up the next day, get 6 hours of sleep, and we'll get up the next day and do it again. But it's now I look at it and I think it's just so destructive, that work hard, play hard culture. um, you can do it for short periods of time, and I think everybody has those seasons in their life, but that you can't do it for a prolonged period of time. That's never really sustainable. And I think that the other element of that, to your point about how do men get pushed a little bit differently there, when you think about that phrase like work life balance, so I think so many people think about the terms work and life, and they're trying to do all the things, all the time, but they're not thinking enough about the balance. And unfortunately, we still have, even with as much movement forward as there's been in, you know, women in the workplace and who's running the family and men taking the leadership role of running the family. I still think for the most part in a lot of industries, there's still sort of an expectation that if you're male, your work life balance doesn't have to be as balanced as if you're as compared to a female. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because definitely with women, more of the child rearing, childcare falls on our plate along with the career and the house.
yeah,
So We
which is actually worse. It's, I mean,
yeah.
I have not had to do that, and I don't know how I could even possibly manage that. I would have to totally change careers, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that we're kind of living in a pressure cooker, and the older I
Mhm.
get, I start wondering if keeping up with the Joneses is even worth it. Like, is that even sustainable? Because I just don't think it really is.
I don't know. I've tried not to be one to like keep up with the Joneses per se. I think from the way that I've always looked at this, and my wife fortunately is a very grounding source for me. But we've looked at it as what's our plan? What is it that we want to accomplish? And like we figure out how to make that work, and less about trying to compare what we're doing with anybody else.
Yeah,
And everybody can have their own plan. I mean, there's
yeah.
no in the end, you can't take it with you, and it's
I'm
you
so
just
glad you said that
yeah.
because I mean, it's true, and I mean, I guess as human beings, we're like always wanting to look at what other people are doing, and we're
Mhm,
curious creatures. So
mhm.
when you're looking at that and seeing like what your neighbors are doing, or you're on social media and you're thinking, I got 3 kids and no help, and we're just going at it as hard as we can.
Right,
I It's just like it's not, I don't think it's healthy to keep looking at what everybody else is doing if you're in a place of comparison.
right.
So I'm curious, when you were hustling, you were doing the work hard, play hard. Do you
Mhm.
think that you were in a place of comparison, or was it just kind of more like this is just what we do and you don't even think about it?
At the if I was comparing myself to anybody, it was in a goal-oriented, very work slanted way.
Hmm.
It was very goal-oriented. I mean, I went to graduate school. I have a PhD in criminology. I mean, that's a lot of work to do that. And in that environment, that sort of academic environment where the focus is on publication, the phrase "publish or perish" is very real. That they mean that when they say it. And so I think from that standpoint, yeah, there was some comparison there because you always try to look to who's doing things that are better than you, who's doing things that are bigger or better than what you're doing because you want to emulate them, to try
To
to
try to.
get to that point. Um, but I don't. It it was very my comparisons were all very goal oriented and very
Mhm.
work related. And to be honest, I think for me the big issue was that I completely ignored life. Like the whole life was not part of the equation. It was
Wow,
yeah.
that's really interesting. Um, as I work with and coach women that live in
Mhm,
comparison, and I don't think that they, at least not the clients I've had so far, they don't seem to be as in that place worried about climbing the success ladder as
mhm,
much as they are. This is such an American culture thing, looking the part like they are. It's like the clothes, the shoes, being in the right club, driving
mhm.
the right car, living in the right neighborhood. It's all so fake.
And it's interesting too. I think when you talk about making comparisons to others, particularly you know when you look around and you look at your friends or you look at other people that at work or socially in the community, I think there's an interesting element there that I try to keep in mind and remind myself. It's like we don't always know all of the elements of those people's lives.
Yeah,
And it's sometimes what it looks like they've got everything together. You may find out when you dig down a little bit, like that they don't. They could be complete train wrecks in some aspects of their lives, but they're keeping that very well concealed, right? And I mean, I've met people like that. I've had friends like that. I could say even I was like that for a while. I looked like great, very successful in a lot of regards, but then if you looked at my personal life, oh, it was a train wreck. So um, I think sometimes, it's good for people to keep in mind that what you see outwardly is not always the full story, right? So,
yeah, yeah. No, I'm so glad you brought that up, and this was one of the reasons why I was so excited to have you on the show, is because the first time that you and I chatted,
mhm,
you come across like the next door neighbor or a brother. Like you're just super down to earth and grounded and easy to connect with. And I was just like, dude, you should
Well,
have a
thank you.
show. Like you need to write a book or something. But I just love that you shared you looked the part, but you were not the part on the inside because that was really what I went through.
Yeah.
And that's become a little bit of my signature story to share with people
Mhm.
was I had this international wholesale business and I was putting on entrepreneurial events and the behind the scenes I always show this picture of my bed. I had eaten a cheeseburger in bed. There was a box of Kleenex and a box of candy. And I was like, I was crying in bed. And that was my life, like all the time. But people don't
Yeah.
know because we're so good at sucking it up and putting the mask on and showing that face to the world.
Right. Right. No, I had a similar experience. I there were a number of times when you could have gone into my apartment at the time and found, the empty pizza boxes and you know, probably a week's worth of dishes piled up in in the sink because I hadn't gotten around to doing them. But I'll tell you, all those papers that needed to get written, they got written. They were
You
turned
got
in on
written.
time and they were good. But
I bet they were.
you
Well,
know,
look at you've had so much success, and I do find it very fascinating that you have a degree in criminology. Like, but you're doing something completely different. Now,
mhm.
so did anybody in your world, maybe your parents or somebody you were close to, just go, why aren't you pursuing criminology? You worked so hard for that. What caused the pivot?
um, there were a lot of people. I think there were a lot of people who asked that question, but I think they also understood that at the time, the pressure and like what I was dealing with at the university and trying to navigate an academic position, a tenure track position, ultimately it was just it wasn't fulfilling to me. We had a program, we were trying to make it one of the best in the world, and to do that, they wanted to be very focused on specific, like, pick something to research and you go all in on that one thing. And I like to research a bunch of different things, and I like to work with other people, and they wanted me to do solo research, to do that kind of stuff, and it just kind of, lost its luster. And I said, well, it just wasn't fulfilling enough to me anymore to stay there. It's sort of the effort, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, so to speak, right?
I haven't heard that saying in a while.
Right. Right. So yeah, there were a lot of questions around that, but I think when I explained it to people, they understood that,
Yeah.
you know, plus I think too is, an academic, I had a mentor that told me once, he said, what we do isn't all that great. You write a paper and like maybe three other people who are in your field who are interested in it read it. And it doesn't necessarily, lead to anything else happening, right? We're not changing the world with what we do. Uh,
Well, gosh, all that hard work for just 3 people to read it, I can see that would be disappointing.
yeah, yeah. So the work that I did in the healthcare sector was much more applied, and we could see how that was impacting things every day. I
Yeah.
I apologize. My dog just ran in here, and she's going to
Oh,
start
hey,
making
dogs
noise.
are allowed. You wanna put your dog up on the screen? Is this a big dog?
No, no. We have this is
Oh,
this is Indy. She is a Cairn Terrier, like Toto from The Wizard of
oh my
Oz.
gosh, that's what I was gonna say, total Toto dog.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow, what a cutie pie. Welcome to the show.
yeah. She doesn't like to be left out. We should have named her FOMO. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I'd love for you to put your advice hat on. There's two
Mhm,
things I'd like for you to talk about is one, if you had a kid brother, or maybe you were talking to the younger version of yourself or just
mhm.
dealing out some good advice, how to really identify that mega burnout, and then also how to decide when you're on that career path and you've got two courses of study that you really like how do you make that decision of which one to walk out?
Yeah. Okay, those are good questions. So I'll start with the first one, like how to start recognizing the burnout. The first thing that I would say is that you really want to, as much as you can, is try to prioritize your activities. Really be thinking about how you want to schedule your time. And that's both in work and in life, right? I say you want to budget your time like you budget your money, right?
Mm,
I don't know if you're a fan of Dave Ramsey or if you're familiar with his teachings at all, but he says you want to tell your money where to go, not try to figure out where it went at the end of the month, right? So you build a budget, you tell your money where to go. You should do the same thing with your time. You want to identify the things that are priorities in your life, both for work and life, and then schedule accordingly. And I also say defend that time. Defend the time that you've scheduled to be with family. Defend the time you scheduled to be with work, because that's how you make it work. You have to recognize that there are going to be seasons of slack and seasons of effort. And I always recommend that people try to. You want to maximize the season of slack. It's
yeah,
like you want to have that extra time as much as you can. So, if the idea is that you're going to put in time to doing something, put in the time to do it well so that you get return on it down the road and you're not having to go back and reinvent the wheel every time.
yeah.
Um, and then really make sure you're taking the time to take care of yourself. And
Mhm.
I'm the poster child for not having done that, right? You want to show up as your best self for your clients, your team, your family, your friends. And if you're burning the candle at both ends in the middle, eventually it's going to break into pieces.
Yeah,
So you want to make sure that you take care of yourself to maintain your mental sharpness, because otherwise it'll start to dull. Like small
mhm,
things will start to slip. And it's
yeah,
good. This could be in any kind of job, any profession. Small things start to slip, and it happens slowly at first. But then, as that burnout starts to set in, it'll get bigger and bigger. You'll start to see bigger things slip, and so you really want to try to take care of yourself and be okay with focusing on your mental health. Like it's a real thing and it's an important thing.
yeah.
Um,
When you were going through burnout, was there any element of depression that went with it, or was it just more like a body fatigue, like, "I just have to stop"?
oh, I think there was an absolute element of depression, certainly anxiety. That's
Yeah,
I've had to deal with that, which
yeah,
they're very very similar kinds of uh,
mhm,
like diagnoses and similar symptoms.
yeah,
But the I wouldn't say it was a deep depression. I think when I had really bad insomnia, that was probably the worst because it 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 almost felt like it wasn't going to end. It seemed like whatever I tried to do didn't work to make it stop, and that became depressing because it was like, okay, now I just have this new world. And fortunately, it did stop. But
Have you ever ran a team where you suspected, or maybe you straight up knew somebody on your team was at that same place?
yes, yes,
Ooh,
I
okay. Tell us about that. Like, what did you pick up on? Was it nuance or was it really blatant?
It was a little bit of both. It was a little bit of both. It was again, it was one of those things, and it kind of gets back to the mental sharpness. Um, this was when I was working in healthcare quality improvement, and we had a person on our team who was an attorney by training, very sharp person, very smart, and usually so on top of their game. Like they were very oriented towards details. They could do like write very complex documents and they always came out pristine. And we started noticing things were slipping over the course of a couple of months and they were, becoming more persistent. And then the more overt uh, symptoms that we noticed after a couple of months was the sort of a change in demeanor. Um,
Yeah.
it very clearly was becoming more frustrated, little, little, little more hurt with his coworkers about things, and there were family issues at home, and it was causing a lot of stress, with their parents, and so we understood, but it did have to sit down and say, what's going on? You're normally not like this, and
Yeah.
we had to do a little digging and fortunately we had a good relationship and we were able to make some accommodations to help resolve the issue. But it was difficult for a few months.
Yeah, yeah, I bet that's a really hard conversation to have. One of the goals with the show is I really want other leaders to hear stories like this so that when they're in the middle of it, they're going, okay, I'm not imagining this. Here's somebody that's walked through it.
Yeah.
and having some ideas of how to walk through it. I think so many people, they can take for granted that in the workplace, a lot of people spend more time in the workplace than they do at home with their family. I mean,
Yeah.
you talk about burnout. And so that becomes kind of your second family.
Hmm.
And you probably know people better than you might think that you know because you're just observing them
In a
every
lot of
single
ways. Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
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 Yes.
I found that, sometimes, and we had to do this a lot too, because we had a really talented team, a small but talented team that put in a lot of effort. I mean, everyone on the team did. And so it became pretty commonplace for us to have sort of like the mental health check-ins, and, just even
Mm,
pulling somebody aside and just saying, "Hey, are you okay? I know you've been doing X, Y,
yeah.
and Z. I know you were here late last night, or you came in really early, you know."
Hmm.
So just to have those conversations and not necessarily push people, never any kind of accusatory tone or anything like that, but just, "Hey, are you okay?" And then
Yeah.
on top of that, trying to take advantage of the opportunities when you do get those seasons where things are a little out of whack, trying to
Hmm.
take advantage of the opportunities when you can say, "We don't have anything else going on today. Go home." Like, just
Yeah.
leave, right? You're taking a half day. I don't even want to see you here. Just leave. Um,
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm so glad you brought that point up because there are a lot of leaders that they're just slaves to the time clock.
yeah.
It's like they just don't understand like that work-life balance is so important. And I think what you just said, the check-in, are you okay? And hey,
Mhm.
we've got our projects done, go home and take a break.
Yeah.
That really fosters a deeper relationship so that people know, like, "Hey, you really are looking out for me."
Yeah. No, I agree. It completely builds that, really. It builds trust. It builds empathy. It builds a sense of solidarity.
Yeah.
And then especially as a leader, I am a firm believer. I believe in delegating things, but I'm also a firm believer. I'm not going to ask my team to do anything that I wouldn't also do.
Mm,
So, if people are going to have to stay late, unless I had something I absolutely had to do, like
yeah.
outside of work, I was going to be there right there with them, helping. So I think, some of those things for executives and leaders that, if you can just show that empathy, build that trust, show like it's a team, right? I mean, if you have a
Yeah.
team, you have a team, then treat it like a team.
Mhm.
And the coach doesn't leave after halftime, right?
Right.
That doesn't happen.
Right. Well, that's so
So,
good. Okay, so give us your best advice for making that big decision of which career path to pursue.
uh,
It's not
I-
easy.
no, it's not. It's a great question. So my best advice on trying to choose between career paths, uh, I will always go down the road of saying that you should probably follow your heart. Like, what is it
Mm,
that, and not your heart in terms of my heart's telling me that I will definitely be able to make more money if I go down a certain road. But when you
right.
think about what are the things that are going to bring you happiness, what are the things that are going to make you feel fulfilled?
Mhm.
It sounds cliche, but nobody's on their deathbed saying, "Gee, I wish I worked harder." So when you think about it in terms of like what you're doing,
Mm,
that's one of the reasons why I'm glad I left academia, because everything I've done ever since then has been applied research, and it has had real impact, and that is incredibly satisfying,
yeah.
for someone like me. So I say think about the things that you value as a human being. Whether it's religion, whether it's family, whether it's you know charity, whether it's helping people out, whether it's volunteerism, whatever those things are that matter to you. Um, think about your options and pick the option that's going to lead you in the direction of best being able to satisfy those things. And then as a secondary goal, look at it from the standpoint of, okay, now how do I make this economically viable, right? I mean, we all have to eat, right? And if you're in any kind of entrepreneurial endeavor, you're doing it because you'd like to make money, I think. At least that's a one goal usually. So, you know, um, I'd say focus on the things that are going to bring you happiness first, and then focus on the ways that you can make it economically viable. And that's not something I've ever seen. Ever never seen anyone just purely not be able to do that, right? I mean, there are ways
Yeah.
to do it. If you look around, you'll find examples. I
Yeah.
think I think the most bizarre one that I heard this recently, was somebody who was actually making money, um, teaching a course on how to care for your giraffe. And
What? Say that again? Care for
yes,
your
yeah,
what?
they were teaching a course on how to care for your giraffe. I didn't know that there were that many people with pet giraffes, but apparently that was a thing. So, um, but they were making money with it. Thought, great. I mean, there you go. You can find something.
Hey, I need a giraffe. Sign me up.
Okay, I'll find out. I'll send you the information.
Well, the funny thing is because before I hit record, I told you that I quit my day job.
Mhm.
And so,
Congratulations, by the way.
right? So I was working for a nonprofit and I really believed in the cause. But I got to the point where I wasn't growing, I
Mhm.
wasn't being challenged. And I thought, I'm not making the kind of impact that I really want to make.
Right.
And it wouldn't have mattered if they would have countered and said, here's more money, or do you want more days off, or whatever it is. Just that what you were just describing is like, you've got to be happy. If you're going to do something, you've got
Mhm.
to enjoy doing it. Because when you don't, it's just a grind. I think that really contributes to the burnout you were talking about earlier.
Mhm.
And and how can you do a good job if you absolutely are burned out or you hate what you're doing?
Right. Right. Absolutely. And I think that you get into, y you know, you mentioned, like, not feeling like you were being challenged, or like you were being able to you were able to make an impact. Um, if you've got a job where you're not being challenged, I mean, then you're not growing, right? And if you're not able to make your impact, then you're not finding your happiness. You're not really able to be true to your own values because of that.
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter how much money they throw at you. I mean, the research has shown that you know monetary incentives, like a raise, it feels good for the short term, and then eventually, employees who receive a raise, they move on, and their satisfaction levels go back to where they were prior to the raise.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like whatever the problems were, that promotion or that raise will feel good for a while, and then you're still going to have to deal with the same organization, the same reality that you were dealing with before. And if you're really in an unfortunate position, eventually you get promoted and enough raises that management comes in and starts saying things like, "We pay you a lot of money to do this," and actually can have a backlash effect where you get more stressed out and have more pressure put on you because you're in a position where you're getting paid more. So if you ever find yourself in that position, my recommendation is run. Just run the other way.
I can just see after this episode drops, getting text messages and emails from people going, okay, so I quit my job after I heard you and Rob talk about this.
Yeah,
Okay. Are you hiring Rob? Maybe you got something for one
I
of
would
our
love to be. I'm
listeners.
trying. Hopefully, I will be doing that soon.
Oh. Well, this has just been such a great conversation. You're very wise and you just have such a nice way about sharing things that are not the easiest to talk about. So I really appreciate your candid stories and just being here with me. This is great.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. This is actually not a story that I talk about very often. I think most people that know me, if they've heard that story, they are usually a little surprised.
Yeah,
But I do appreciate the opportunity to have the conversation and be able to talk to your audience.
absolutely. You're so welcome. So I will have your contact information, your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. But Rob, is there anything else that you want to share about F1 analytics or why somebody might really need your services?
So, if you're an entrepreneur or you're in a leadership position and you have to deal with analytics or analyst employees or teams and you're having challenges communicating with them, give me a shot. I'm very happy to talk with people about that, and that's really what I'm focused on now, is trying to help people that are in those positions who may not have an analytic background be able to navigate those waters more directly and make their lives easier and smoother and more successful.
That kind of sounds like, I don't know, just put, not to throw another thing on your plate, Rob, since we're trying to have work-life balance, but you know, a mastermind? A mastermind with Rob Fornango to talk about how to lead well and navigate analytics. I'm just saying.
There are things that are in the works. I haven't gotten to a launch point yet, but there are things that are in the works. So
Oh, I'm so
yeah.
excited. And when that launches, you need to let me know so that I can promote that out, because there's a lot of men that need what you have to say. They need to hear what you've walked through, and they need that wisdom. I mean,
Oh, thank you. I
absolutely.
appreciate that. And let me know if there's anything else that your audience that I can help your audience with. I'd be happy to.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, Rob Fernango,
Thank you.
F1 Analytics. And you can find all of his contact information in the show notes below.
Well, hey, friends, thank you for joining me for another episode of Called to Confidence. Be sure that you connect with Rob on LinkedIn. Let him know that you heard his interview and appreciate all that he shared with us today. And if you're looking for personal development coaching, I just launched a brand new program, the Kingdom Confidence Method, and that's linked up below as well. As always, my friends, I'm wishing you every good thing.